The 59th inauguration is shaping up to be quite an unusual one. A field of flags has appeared in the nation's capital. But it's not the first break from tradition in American history. First Lady Melania Trump bids farewell to the nation, saying it's been her greatest honor serving in the position. President Trump's advisory 1776 Commission released a public report. Its goal is to revisit the nation's founding principles. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. A field of flags has appeared in the U.S. Capitol. It's shaping up to be one of the most unusual inaugurations in history. But what other special inaugurations occurred in history? We'll touch on that later, but first, some updates. And a quick clarification, Parler is not fully back online. The platform appeared online suddenly over the weekend with 4 short messages, but is not back to fully functioning. I just wanted to clarify that. Parler CEO did say he's confident the site could be back by the end of January. One of the messages that appeared was a reminder on why Parler was started in the first place. CEO John Mates wrote, "We believe privacy is paramount and free speech essential, especially on social media. Our aim has always been to provide a nonpartisan public square where individuals can enjoy and exercise their rights to both." Mates says Parler plans to welcome everyone back soon. Parler had been kicked offline by Amazon Web Services. Amazon, Apple, and Google all removed Parler amid claims the site helped incite the violence at the Capitol on January 6th. Parler is currently suing Amazon, saying the company has no evidence the social media platform was used to incite the U.S. Capitol breach. And on the note of free speech and whether inflammatory speech is allowed, let's look at a case from 1949. Known as Terminillo v. Chicago. In it, Justice William Douglas decided that the Constitution defends speech that is of differing opinion. Writing, "Accordingly, a function of free speech under our system of government is to invite dispute. It may indeed best serve its high purpose when it induces a condition of unrest, creates dissatisfaction with conditions as they are, or even stirs people to anger. Speech is often provocative and challenging. It may strike at prejudices and preconceptions and have profound unsettling effects as it presses for acceptance of an idea. That is why freedom of speech, thought not absolute, is nevertheless protected against censorship or punishment, unless shown likely to produce a clear and present danger of a serious substantive evil that rises far above public inconvenience, annoyance, or unrest." There is no room under our Constitution for a more restrictive view, for the alternative would lead to standardization of ideas either by legislatures, courts, or dominant political or community groups. This came after a Catholic priest was under fire for making inflammatory public comments. William Douglas served on the Supreme Court for 36 years. He was nominated by FDR and confirmed at age 40, making him one of the youngest justices appointed to the court. He also set the record for longest continuous service on the Supreme Court. And now to some updates. President Trump's advisory 1776 Commission released a public report. Its goal is to revisit the nation's founding principles. The 1776 report notes the division among Americans in their understanding of the country's founding history and how it should be governed. The report re-examines the principles and ideas set down in the Declaration of Independence. It notes neither America nor any other nation has perfectly lived up to the universal truths of equality, liberty, justice, and government by consent. Adding, but no nation before America ever dared state those truths as the formal basis for its politics, and none has strived harder or done more to achieve them. The report also looks at challenges to America's founding principles, some that are historical, like slavery, and others that are contemporary, like being more progressive, fascism, communism, and identity politics. The report states the arguments, tactics, and names of these movements have changed, and the magnitude of the challenge has varied, yet they are all united by adherence to the same falsehood, that people do not have equal worth and equal rights. It warns of the dangers of modern political movements departing from America's founding principles. noting great reforms like abolition, women's suffrage, anti-communism, the civil rights movement, and the pro-life movement have often come forward that improve our dedication to the principles of the Declaration of Independence under the Constitution. The report also calls for a national renewal of education that teaches future American citizens to stand up for America and defend our way of life. The report notes at home, in school, at the workplace, and in the world, it is the people and only the people who have the power to stand up for America and defend our way of life. This comes as Secretary of State Mike Pompeo posted on Twitter a few final thoughts. The United States of America is the greatest country in the history of civilization. This came alongside a picture of George Washington crossing the Delaware River. And on final thoughts, First Lady Melania Trump is wishing the nation farewell. She described her time in Washington as the greatest honor of her life.
The past 4 years have been unforgettable. As Donald and I conclude our time in the White House, I think of all of the people I have taken home in my heart and their incredible stories of love, patriotism, and determination.
She gave thanks to members of the U.S. military, calling them heroes, adding they'll remain in her prayers.
I see the faces of brave young soldiers who have told me with their pride in their eyes how much they love serving this country. To every service member and to our incredible military families, you are heroes, and you will always be in my thoughts and prayers. I think of all of the members of law enforcement who greet us everywhere we go. At every hour of every day, they stand guard to keep our communities safe, and we are forever in their debt.
The First Lady also spoke about her future hopes for the benefit of children, echoing her Be Best campaign.
It is my sincere hope that every American will do their part to teach our children what it means to be best. I encourage parents to educate your children about the courageous and selfless heroes who worked and sacrificed to make this country the land of the free.
Trump's Be Best initiative encourages children to reach their full potential. One component is trying to address the rise in bullying and cyberbullying among kids. Another deals with the opioid epidemic.
In all circumstances, I ask every American to be an ambassador of Be Best, to focus on what unites us, to raise above what divides us, to always choose love over hatred, peace over violence, and others before yourself.
The First Lady urged parents to teach their children to do their best, educating them about Americans who worked hard and sacrificed for the good of the country and teaching them how to lead by example and care for those in their community. The Trumps are scheduled to leave the White House on January 20th and won't be attending the inauguration of Joe Biden. Speaking of inaugurations, a field of flags display on the National Mall in the nation's capital was lit up Monday night. It's organized by the Presidential Inaugural Committee to mark the upcoming swearing-in of President-elect Joe Biden. The display features over 190,000 U.S. flags and nearly 60 pillars of light as a way of echoing the America United theme of Inauguration Week. The committee says every U.S. state and territory is represented, adding that the display represents all Americans unable to travel to Washington to attend the inauguration due to the pandemic. Biden's presidential inauguration on January 20th is expected to be a much smaller scale event than usual. The organizing committee said it's likely to resemble a State of the Union address. The field of flags is just one part of what makes this year's inauguration one of the most unusual in history. The traditional parade down Pennsylvania Avenue has also been canceled and replaced by a virtual one. The parade usually draws hundreds of thousands of Americans. Inaugural balls have also been canceled, and large areas of the National Mall will be closed to the public. And large areas of D.C. are quiet as transportation is shuttered for the most part. While inauguration is shaping up to be an unusual one with the pandemic, security measures, and President Trump saying he won't attend, let's take a look at history and see some other instances of a break from tradition. Let's go back to 1801, when Thomas Jefferson became the third president of the United States. It marked the first transition of power from one party to another, and also perhaps one of the more peaceful transitions of powers in history, as Jefferson represented the Democratic-Republican Party while John Adams was the Federalist Party. Adams did not attend Jefferson's inauguration. He left Washington ahead of the ceremony. Reasons behind that could be due to the fierce party competition between the two over topics such as the Alien and Sedition Act of 1798, which sought to restrict foreign interference in U.S. politics but could limit free press. Jefferson responded to it with the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, saying states can override federal laws they don't agree with. The Union seemed to be in peril. Jefferson referred to it as the Revolution of 1800. So what were Jefferson's political ideas? They included strict adherence to the Constitution. As he was one of the founding fathers of America, he played a key role in crafting the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson was also more sympathetic to the French Revolution. He emphasized rural America over cities, and he criticized the Federalists for being too sympathetic to monarchy and being aristocratic. Jefferson won the election at 73-65. Despite all the differences, Jefferson's inaugural speech gave a uniting message. It set the precedent of using the inaugural speech to reunite Americans. He said, quote, "All too will bear in mind this sacred principle, that though the will of the majority is in all cases to prevail, that will to be rightful must be reasonable, that the minority possess their equal rights, which equal law must protect, and to violate would be oppression. Let us then, fellow citizens, unite with one ear and one mind." He also touched on having tolerance for opposing ideas, saying every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. We have called by different names brethren of the same principle. We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists. If there be any among us who wish to dissolve this union or to change its Republican form, let them stand undisturbed as monuments of the safety with which error of opinion may be tolerated where reason is left free to combat it. Jefferson's inauguration also marked the first time the ceremony was held in D.C., as the design of the city only began in 1791. In other words, it was a brand new capital city. Jefferson marks one example in history, but what's another? Let's go forward a few decades to over half a century later, when the country was rocked by the Civil War. On March 4, 1865, Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, was sworn in a second time. The country had been embroiled in a civil war for the past 4 years. It would end a month after Lincoln's second inauguration. Lincoln ran as a National Union Party candidate, although he was still part of the Republican Party. This was a way to appeal to border states during the election and to show his willingness to unify with the South. He chose Andrew Jackson, a Southern War Democrat from border state Tennessee, as his running mate for the second term. The War Democrats in the Union supported the war, but wanted to restore the Union back to how it was in 1860. The Northern Democrats were very divided during this time, and Lincoln was very unpopular during the war, even in the North. This was due to the fact that many radical Republicans saw him as insufficiently abolitionist and too lenient to the Southern states. Meanwhile, the Copperhead faction of the Northern Democrats opposed the war and saw Lincoln as a tyrant. Some sympathized with the Confederate. In 1864, the war effort was bogged down with seemingly no end in sight. Public morale was low, and there was no sure guarantee Lincoln could win the election. Lincoln's second inaugural address was relatively short. It was also rich with biblical references and themes. He referenced Psalm 19:9 of the King James Bible, saying if God wills that the war continue until all the wealth piled by the bondman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Lincoln didn't blame the South for the war, instead saying he believed the war was an atonement for the nation's sin because of slavery. He said both read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. The prayers of both could not be answered. That of neither has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. He also gave a unifying message looking forward to the future of the Union, saying, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations." But what do you think tomorrow's events will be like? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.